Okay. Aztec religion is complex. It is polytheistic. The Spanish estimate that there are around 2,000 deities at the time of conquest to record. Each of them, however, has individual attributes, a little bit like Christian saints, so that we can recognize them and tell them apart. Of these deities, and each of them has a tendency to be dual in nature. That means they can be kind to us, they can be cruel to us. The most important of them would be the sun, and that relates specifically to the origin myth. The origin myth, like everybody else's origin myths, help to explain why things are the way they are. And according to the Aztec origin myth, the gods themselves sacrificed themselves to create human beings. They used their own blood to create humans. It's now our turn to return the favor. It's payback time, essentially. We have to repay the debt and nourish the gods, giving the gods energy, and that would be certainly the sun, which travels through the sky every day, and as it does so, it becomes tired. How do you do this? You feed the gods, and you feed them with a precious substance that is human blood. And human blood, any blood, actually is associated with a precious liquid providing a sense of fertility and continuation. If you do not do this, the gods will cease and consequently the world will cease. The importance of the sun god, Huitzilopochtli, to the Aztecs is very personal because he's also their guardian god, their protector god. And consequently, the religion of the Aztecs is very intimately linked with the politics of the Aztecs. And if you go down to the red strip that I've included, the Aztecs do foster blood sacrifice and link it to the support of the state. So religion and politics in the Aztec world are intimately connected. That may also explain one of the differences between Aztec sacrifice and sacrifices that came before them and sacrifices that were performed around the world. Human sacrifice is something that most cultures, at least in their origin stages, participate in. Each and every one of you probably have distant ancestors who were engaged in human sacrifice. The difference is the scale, and that is one thing that makes it difficult to understand Aztec society. The Aztecs performed human sacrifice based upon the calendar. Certain festival dates required sacrifices in particular, but Aztecs practiced human sacrifice on a rather grand and large scale. They claim, in fact, through their histories, that when the Twin Temple, and that's again in the image in the great center of the sacred precinct in Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, that when this was dedicated, in other words, completed and opened for the first time, and dedicated to the gods it represented, the Aztecs claimed that they offered 80,000 sacrificial victims. Now, we're willing to say perhaps thousands, but probably not 80,000. That's, we think, an inflated number that the Aztecs intended to suggest to maybe give good press to themselves in terms of the way in which they were supporting their own gods and the gods of all of the people. Okay. I'd also like to suggest, if we go down to the fourth point, the Aztecs also believed that we are in the fifth sun or the fifth world. There had been earlier creations, creation periods. Each of these periods was doomed to failure, doomed to end, and that's going to be true for the fifth period, the period we're in now. How can we put this off and keep going? Well, we can provide the gods with nourishment, and by so doing, we're going to allow the world to continue. If you truly believe this, I think you can understand the necessity for human sacrifice in order for the continuation of the world as you know it and all of the people you care about and love. Okay. On a more personal note, at the bottom in terms of daily life, individuals believed in an afterlife. When you die, there was a place to go, sometimes temporarily, sometimes for a duration. This place could be in the heavens, and there were 13 levels of heaven. There were also 9 levels of the underworld, and there was an axis mundi, an axis of the world, or the cosmos, essentially. And we're used to seeing this in many cultures around the world. For the Aztecs, that went through the Twin Temple. So in the most sacred precinct of the Aztec world is an axis linking the heavens and also the underworld. The place that you are destined to go, and I'm going to say destined because there is an element of fatalism in Aztec religion, a sense of destiny, a sense of inevitability that filters through and colors the beliefs of the Aztec people. It does depend on who you are in life, you know, what you do, and how you die. If you are a warrior and you die on the battlefield, you will go to a region, excuse me, one region of the heavens that will be a paradise. A woman who dies giving birth to a child has an equal opportunity of going to a realm that is, I would say, as respectful, perhaps as pleasant as the Aztec warrior. This is a belief system then that is not particularly warm and fuzzy. It is a maintenance faith in which you need to support the gods so that in turn they can support you. It comes closest in terms of the religions I've studied to the faith of the Vikings, who also have a view of the afterlife based upon what it is you do in this world as an occupation, as a career, as a position in society, and in particular the way in which you die. The Vikings also managed to elevate the deaths of warriors and the deaths of women who give birth in childbirth. I want to show us now one of the most important carvings that deals with Aztec religion and views of continuation. Okay. This is a depiction of Coatlicue, who is the mother of Huitzilopochtli, and that would be the sun god, the god of sun, the god of war, and the patron deity of the Aztecs. So this is a particularly important carving for the Aztecs. You're going to find a lot in O'Reilly in the introduction of our textbook. And I've got figure 1.5 for us there, so I think you'll want to take a look at that. She is a particularly important figure, and she definitely is a figure who stresses duality, which is a foundation for the belief system that the Aztecs held. She was the statue was originally located at the top of the Twin Temples, but during the destruction by the Spanish, it was knocked down, thrown down, and it was buried. It was only rediscovered in the 18th century, but in the 18th century, when it was first found, it was considered to be too terrible and probably too pagan as well, so it was reburied. Today, it's in the National Museum in Mexico City, and it's one of the hallmarks of the great achievements of the Aztecs. It is a depiction of the mother of the gods. She is one of the earth goddesses. There are many earth goddesses. Her particular fame comes from the fact that she gives birth to the sun, to the moon, and to the 400 stars. She also, in the story of the fifth son, may be one of the earth goddesses who sacrificed herself in order to propel the sun and give it energy so that it can move through the skies in the story of the fifth world, or the fifth sun. This is a figure that is actually, at least for our eyes, probably a very terrifying depiction. It was intended to be intimidating. It stands roughly 11 feet in height, and it weighs about 12 tons. So there's a lot of our mother goddess. It does depict her dual nature, her ability to give birth and also to take life and to draw from life. Let me give us, here we go. This is probably easier to read in the statue of our mother goddess, or the Aztec mother of all gods. Certainly the mother of the most significant of the gods. She is a figure shown as someone who has nurtured life, and you can tell that because her breasts are hanging. They're spent. They're the breasts of someone who has breastfed children and produced life. A little too hard to see, but there are also lines of flesh around her abdomen, and that suggests, in addition, the flesh that hangs after the birthing process. So it's a reference to her motherhood and to her life-giving qualities. On the other hand, she definitely has a dual nature that deals with death. Her necklace consists of a series of hearts, hands, and a human skull. In between the necklace, you can see the lingering shapes of the pendulous breasts of our mother goddess. Her head also is created out of two snakes. These are rattlesnakes. The two snakes look directly at each other, and by doing so in a very gestalt way, create a single unified face that is frontally looking out at the viewer very powerfully. The theme of snakes, again, is echoed in the skirt, and the name of our mother goddess does translate as she of the snakes, or she of the snake skirt. These snakes on the skirt are black king snakes. Everything else on the statue would be a rattler, a rattlesnake. The snake is an important symbol in Aztec art and culture because of its association with life, death, rebirth, and fertility. It's also associated with the underworld and with the earth because it slithers across the ground. Mostly, however, the snake, any snake, is capable of shedding its skin, which usually occurs after hibernation. So new life comes out of old life, and that essentially is the mantra for the figure of our mother goddess. It is necessary to make sacrifices to the mother goddess. And if we do that, in turn, she will provide for us. It follows the mantra that I use for pretty much everything in Mesoamerican art. And I think I've got it here. Yeah, at the top right here. Out of death comes new life. And that in specific refers to the notion of creating sacrifice, giving sacrifice, human sacrifice, providing the blood and offering the heart of human beings to sustain the gods and the goddesses. And if we do that, then in turn, they will sustain us. Okay, a closer look at the face of our mother goddess that's created by two serpents, two rattlers, basically facing nose to nose, snout to snout, with their fangs projecting in the direction of the viewer. This is intended to be intimidating because this is a goddess. In some ways, you can think of as a goddess supporting the Aztecs. The figure actually leans. Now, it's kind of difficult to get a shot of that, so I'm going to send you down to the lower right. And you can get a little bit of a sense of the way in which this 12-ton statue would lean in the direction of the viewer, suggesting the authority, perhaps, of the mother goddess who creates the god, who is the protector of the Aztecs. Typically, this also, as a work of art, adheres to a formal Aztec work of art, adheres to the block of stone, doesn't break out of the block of stone. You can sense the rectangle from which this was carved. It is also created with relatively simplified geometric regularity. It's also typical of the Aztecs because it's a powerful piece. This is a very strong image with a kind of taunt and energy. Frequently when I look at Aztec art, I think there's something inside the stone and it is straining to get out. And that's one of the qualities I think that Aztec artists convey in their images. This is a series of drawings that was created in the 18th century, shortly after this was discovered, before it was reburied. This is a very monumental piece. What I'd like to suggest also about it that's significant and unusual from Western perspectives is that the underside of this was also carved. And if you go down right here, this is the drawing of what appears on the bottom of our statue. In some Aztec pieces, there are actually carved bottoms that were never intended to be seen. We do again think that this is an ideological addition to the sculpture, in other words, symbolic, and it particularly seems to appear in images that are associated with the earth, with the underworld, as our Great Mother Goddess actually would be. To appreciate the significance of the Mother Goddess to the Aztecs, we have to look at another part of the origin story and another one of the Aztec myths. The Great Mother Goddess, Coatlicue, was in a pyramid one day on Snake Mountain, or Coatepec. And there's a little depiction of that in the upper right corner, which I'll come back to. And she was sweeping. She was sweeping the temple when suddenly, out of nowhere, a ball of feathers appeared and caused her to become pregnant. She became pregnant with the sun. This occurred after she had promised her other children, and that would be the moon and the 400 stars, that she would never have another child. When they heard the news of this, they became enraged. Their mother had lied to them. Their mother was going to give birth to another child, taking away their own position. So they plotted to kill her. They come, and just as they are killing her, emerging fully formed and born from her belly is the sun god, who will become the patron of the Aztecs. He is going to rise up and he's going to slay the moon, his sister, causing her body to roll down the mountain, Snake Mountain, to the ground. And he is also going to dispatch all of the stars. From this point forward, there will be every day a symbolic conflict that occurs in the sky between light and dark. It is therefore necessary to provide energy to the sun, to sustain the sun so that it can fight essentially against the moon, and to ensure that we can continue living the life that we enjoy living. This is a depiction of the moon goddess, and it was located originally. This is a reconstruction of our twin pyramids. This was located at the base of it so that if you are a sacrificial prisoner being taken to the top to be offered to the gods, you would see this, you would understand that your sacrifice was a reenactment, in a sense, of the battle that originally took place between the moon and the sun. Up in my manuscript, which is from the Florentine Codex, I simply want you to see the way in which Aztec picture writing worked. This is a depiction of Snake Mountain, and it's a mountain. It's got a little snake on top, so you get the combination of the words mountain snake. And there's also a sacrificial victim that is located there. And this references the origin story, essentially, associated with the destruction of the moon by the sun. As a piece of sculpture, this again is pretty powerful Aztec carving. It is a depiction of the moon goddess. I warned you about these Aztec words. Coyolxauhqui. She is shown, literally she's the moon, so she's shown in a circular creation referencing the moon, but it's really big. It has an 11 foot diameter, and it references her after she's been decapitated, cut into pieces, and thrown from the top of Snake Mountain. She is shown as a relief piece of sculpture. There is a sense of a circular movement as our eye follows a spinning motion around the center, kind of arcing forms, very sharp, very hard edged. It is typical of the Aztecs in terms of its power and its terrible nature, as she is displayed as a disembodied, decapitated figure with severed limbs. This is a piece that also originally would have been colored. There were traces of paint that have been identified on the surface, not enough to actually see or illogically reproduce. They however, have been used to give us an idea of what it is this could have looked like in the image that you're seeing on the right. Okay, now the power of the work is going to be enhanced by the inclusion of color itself. And I think it's going to add to the rhythmic movement around the piece, which is created in a circular form.